Welcome back to our channel, Mars Sunset Media. Today, we're delving into one of the most significant and often contentious aspects of American history, the U.S. Supreme Court. As the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court has the power to interpret the Constitution, shape the laws of the nation, and influence the daily lives of millions of Americans. While many of its rulings are celebrated and accepted, others have ignited intense debates and left lasting impacts on society. One such ruling was the one on Monday, July 1, 2024, when the Supreme Court ruled that Donald Trump may claim immunity from criminal prosecution for some of the actions he took as president. It also granted presidents in general a definitive, absolute immunity from prosecution for core official acts, and said presidents should be presumed immune for a much more expansive list of acts. In this video, we're counting down the top 10 most controversial other rulings by the U.S. Supreme Court before the Trump ruling. These decisions have not only defined legal precedents, but have also stirred national discourse, provoked public outrage, and even sparked social and political movements. From landmark cases that have tackled civil rights, personal freedoms, and equality to those that have altered the landscape of American politics and governance. Each ruling on our list tells a story of conflict, change, and the struggle for justice. Whether you're a history enthusiast, a law student, or simply curious about the pivotal moments that have shaped American society, this countdown will provide a comprehensive and insightful look into the Supreme Court's most debated decisions. So, sit back, grab some popcorn, and get ready to explore the rulings that have left an indelible mark on the fabric of the United States. Let's dive into the top 10 most controversial Supreme Court rulings and uncover the stories behind these momentous decisions. 10. District of Columbia versus Heller, 2008. In District of Columbia versus Heller, the Supreme Court ruled 5-4 that the Second Amendment protects an individual's right to possess a firearm, unconnected with service in a militia, and to use that firearm for traditionally lawful purposes, such as self-defense within the home. This landmark decision struck down Washington, D.C.'s strict gun control laws, which included a ban on handgun possession and requirements that firearms in the home be disassembled or bound by a trigger lock. The majority opinion, written by Justice Antonin Scalia, emphasized the historical context of the Second Amendment, arguing that it guarantees an individual's right to bear arms. The dissenting justices contended that the Second Amendment was intended to protect the right to bear arms in the context of militia service, and criticized the majority for judicial activism. The ruling has had significant implications for gun control legislation, fueling ongoing debates over the balance between gun rights and public safety. Advocates for gun control argue that the decision hampers efforts to address gun violence, while gun rights supporters see it as a vital protection of individual freedoms. 9. Burwell versus Hobby Lobby Stores, Incorporated, 2014. Burwell versus Hobby Lobby Stores, Incorporated was a landmark case in which the Supreme Court ruled 5-4 that closely held for-profit corporations can be exempt from regulations that violate the religious beliefs of their owners. The case involved the Affordable Care Act's mandate that employers provide insurance coverage for contraception. Hobby Lobby, a craft store chain owned by a Christian family, argued that the mandate forced them to violate their religious beliefs. The court, in an opinion written by Justice Samuel Alito, held that the Religious Freedom Restoration Act of 1993, RFRA, allows for such exemptions, asserting that the government had not chosen the least restrictive means to achieve its goal of providing contraceptive coverage. The decision sparked widespread controversy, as critics argued it allowed businesses to impose their religious beliefs on employees, potentially opening the door for further exemptions on religious grounds. Supporters praised the ruling for protecting religious freedom and limiting government overreach. The case highlighted the ongoing tension between religious liberty and reproductive rights, raising questions about the extent to which personal beliefs can influence corporate policies and employees' access to health care. 8. Obergefell versus Hodges, 2015. In Obergefell versus Hodges, the Supreme Court ruled 5-4 that the Constitution guarantees the right to same-sex marriage under the Due Process and Equal Protection Clauses of the 14th Amendment. The case consolidated several challenges to state bans on same-sex marriage. Justice Anthony Kennedy, writing for the majority, stated that the right to marry is a fundamental liberty, and denying it to same-sex couples demeans their dignity and diminishes their personhood. The decision effectively legalized same-sex marriage nationwide, striking down state bans and requiring states to recognize marriages performed in other jurisdictions. The ruling was celebrated as a historic victory for LGBTQ+ rights, marking a significant milestone in the fight for equality. However, it also faced strong opposition from those who believed it undermined traditional marriage and religious freedoms. Critics argued that the decision overstepped judicial boundaries by creating new constitutional rights not explicitly stated in the text. The ruling intensified debates over the role of the judiciary, the interpretation of the Constitution, and the balance between civil rights and religious liberty, reflecting broader cultural and political divides in American society. 7. Shelby County versus Holder, 2013. Shelby County versus Holder was a pivotal case in which the Supreme Court ruled 5-4 to strike down key provisions of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, specifically Section 4(b), which established a formula for determining which jurisdictions required federal preclearance before changing voting laws. The majority opinion, written by Chief Justice John Roberts, argued that the formula was outdated and no longer reflective of current conditions. As a result, without the coverage formula, Section 5's preclearance requirement became unenforceable. The decision effectively removed federal oversight from states with histories of voting discrimination, leading to fears of increased voter suppression, particularly among minority communities. Critics argued that the ruling ignored ongoing issues of racial discrimination in voting and dismantled crucial protections that had ensured fairer electoral processes. Supporters claimed that the decision respected state sovereignty and reflected progress in eliminating racial bias in voting practices. The ruling had immediate and significant effects, with several states enacting stricter voting laws shortly after. The decision highlighted deep divisions over the role of federal oversight in ensuring voting rights and sparked renewed efforts to address voter suppression through legislation and advocacy. If you are enjoying this video, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Hit the bell icon to stay updated with our latest releases. Thank you to everyone that have already subscribed. 6. Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission, 2010. Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission was a landmark case in which the Supreme Court ruled 5-4 that the First Amendment prohibits the government from restricting independent expenditures for political campaigns by corporations, unions, and other associations. The case centered on a conservative nonprofit organization's challenge to campaign finance laws after it produced a film critical of Hillary Clinton during the 2008 Democratic primaries. The majority opinion, written by Justice Anthony Kennedy, asserted that political spending is a form of protected speech, and restrictions on corporate expenditures amounted to censorship. The decision overturned previous precedents and dismantled significant portions of the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act of 2002, also known as the McCain-Feingold Act. The ruling has been highly controversial, with critics arguing that it unleashed a torrent of money into politics, allowing wealthy individuals and special interest groups to wield disproportionate influence in elections. Supporters contend that it protects free speech and promotes political engagement. The case has profoundly impacted the political landscape, leading to the rise of super PACs and increasing concerns about the role of money in democratic processes. 5. Bush versus Gore, 2000. Bush versus Gore was a controversial case in which the Supreme Court effectively decided the outcome of the 2000 presidential election by halting the Florida vote recount. The election between Republican candidate George W. Bush and Democratic candidate Al Gore was extremely close, with the results in Florida determining the winner. After a series of legal battles and inconsistent recount procedures, the court ruled 5-4 to stop the recount, citing the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. The majority opinion argued that the varying standards used in different counties violated the principle of equal treatment for all voters. The decision awarded Florida's electoral votes to Bush, securing his victory. Critics accused the court of political bias and overstepping its bounds by intervening in an electoral dispute. The ruling raised concerns about the judiciary's role in democratic processes and its impact on public trust in the electoral system. The case remains a flashpoint in discussions about election integrity, judicial impartiality, and the balance of power between state and federal authorities. 4. Roe v. Wade, 1973. Roe v. Wade was a landmark decision in which the Supreme Court ruled 7-2 that a woman's right to choose to have an abortion is protected by the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment, which guarantees a right to privacy. The case was brought by Jane Roe, a pseudonym for Norma McCorvey, who challenged Texas laws criminalizing most abortions. The court's opinion, written by Justice Harry Blackmun, established a trimester framework to balance the state's interests in regulating abortions and protecting women's health and prenatal life. The ruling invalidated many state laws restricting access to abortion and sparked a nationwide debate that continues to this day. The decision has been a focal point in the culture wars, with pro-choice advocates viewing it as a crucial protection of women's rights and bodily autonomy, while pro-life supporters see it as a moral and ethical failure that permits the taking of unborn lives. The controversy surrounding Roe v. Wade has influenced numerous political campaigns, judicial nominations, and legislative efforts, reflecting deep-seated divisions in American society over reproductive rights. 3. Korematsu v. United States, 1944. In Korematsu v. United States, the Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality of Executive Order 9066, which authorized the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II. The case involved Fred Korematsu, an American citizen who defied the internment orders and was subsequently arrested and convicted. The court, in a 6-3 decision, ruled that the need to protect against espionage outweighed Korematsu's individual rights, deeming the internment a necessary military measure. Justice Hugo Black, writing for the majority, argued that the exclusion of Japanese Americans was justified by the wartime threat. The decision has been widely condemned for its endorsement of racial discrimination and violation of civil liberties. It is seen as a dark chapter in American history, reflecting the prejudice and hysteria of the time. In 1983, Korematsu's conviction was formally vacated in a federal court, and in 2018, the Supreme Court explicitly denounced the Korematsu decision in Trump v. Hawaii, stating that it was gravely wrong. The case remains a powerful reminder of the dangers of sacrificing civil rights in the name of national security. 2. Plessy v. Ferguson, 1896. Plessy v. Ferguson was a landmark case in which the Supreme Court upheld state laws requiring racial segregation in public facilities under the doctrine of separate but equal. The case arose from Homer Plessy's arrest for sitting in a whites-only train car in Louisiana, challenging the state's segregation laws. The court, in a 7-1 decision, ruled that segregation did not in itself constitute unlawful discrimination, as long as the separate facilities were equal. Justice Henry Billings Brown, writing for the majority, argued that the 14th Amendment intended to enforce political equality, not social integration. The lone dissenter, Justice John Marshall Harlan, warned that the decision would become as pernicious as the infamous Dred Scott decision. Plessy v. Ferguson legitimized and reinforced racial segregation and discrimination, leading to the proliferation of Jim Crow laws throughout the South. It wasn't until Brown v. Board of Education in 1954 that the separate but equal doctrine was overturned. The ruling is widely criticized for its role in perpetuating systemic racism and inequality, serving as a stark example of how the judiciary can fail to protect minority rights. 1. Dred Scott v. Sandford, 1857. Dred Scott v. Sandford is often cited as the worst Supreme Court decision in U.S. history. In this case, the court ruled 7-2 that African Americans, whether enslaved or free, could not be American citizens, and therefore had no standing to sue in federal court. The case involved Dred Scott, an enslaved man who sued for his freedom on the grounds that he had lived in free territories. Chief Justice Roger B. Taney's majority opinion also declared the Missouri Compromise unconstitutional, arguing that Congress had no authority to prohibit slavery in the territories. The ruling further entrenched the institution of slavery and denied basic human rights to African Americans. It exacerbated sectional tensions and is considered a contributing factor to the outbreak of the Civil War. The decision was met with outrage in the North and jubilation in the South, illustrating the deep divisions in the country. The Dred Scott decision was effectively overturned by the 13th and 14th Amendments, which abolished slavery and granted citizenship and equal protection under the law to all persons. The case remains a sobering reminder of the court's potential to uphold grave injustices. And there you have it, the top 10 most controversial rulings by the U.S. Supreme Court. These decisions have not only defined legal precedents, but have also ignited passionate debates and movements across the country. Whether you agree or disagree with these rulings, there's no denying their profound impact on American society and the legal landscape. Time will tell how the decision to grant Donald Trump immunity from criminal prosecution for some of the actions he took as president will affect the actions of future presidents. If you found this video insightful, make sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into pivotal moments in history and the law. Hit the bell icon to get notified every time we upload a new video. We'd love to hear your thoughts on these controversial rulings, so leave a comment below and let us know which case you think had the biggest impact. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.